Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 107, and today we're doing a skill analysis. And this is our series where we take an existing skill or piece of equipment or special ability in Infinity and then kind of do a deep dive to talk about how it works, what it does, interesting things you might be able to do with it, and sometimes some of our units that have those abilities that we think are really fun for those reasons. And today we are talking about mobility skills. So we're going to be talking about super jump and climbing plus. One of the big sets of change ups in N5, where I feel like the tail end of N4, they were probably in pretty close parity to one another. And now they're quite a bit different. Super jump has gone off the charts in its mobility, and Climbing Plus is now much more limited than it was. But before we get started, we want to give a quick shout out to Mo Games. And Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity that you can find at mo-games.com. And as part of their sponsorship of Metachemistry, all of our patrons, regardless of level, any of our paid patrons, we do now have the option for free patron members. So if you want to see our posts and things like that, you can join our Patreon for free. But this is for paid members of any level. You get a 10% discount code at Mo Game Store. And in addition, for anyone who's on our Discord server, which is freely available, we raffle off a $40 coupon code each month that you can spend at mo-games.com. So to enter for that, you just need to be a part of our server. It's only eligible for our members that are in North America, because that is where Mo Game ships to. And yeah, so come join us, come chat, and win cool prizes, right? Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And so tonight, to talk about all of our movement shenanigans, we have Ian and myself. So, Ian, how have things been for you since we last spoke? If your hobbying endeavors been, or your games?
I mean, I don't play this game. And it's not that I don't want to. I don't get to.
The worst.
So, yeah, I have not played since we last talked.
Unfortunate. Yeah, I know that's definitely a lot of family commitments, I think you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Family time's important too, I think.
I mean, I guess.
Depends on the family, perhaps. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, it varies quite a lot. Some family is not necessarily quite as worth the investiture. But yeah, for me, we are just about ready to kick off the Training Incident League, which is the Grow League that I have been writing up. I tried it a couple of years ago. It worked out really well. I did a little bit of refinement, a little bit of addition to things. And now we finished registration with 25 players locally, which is awesome. That's super duper exciting. And yeah, so a lot of my Infinity related efforts have been kind of focused around getting that ready, writing up some custom missions, managing the users and stuff, answering questions, and doing stuff like that. I have been trying to do a bit of hobbying. I got a fair few miniatures in, thanks Mo Games, and have been building those. So most of that stuff's built, and I'm hoping to start painting soon, because that would be nice. And yeah, I've gotten in a little bit more. I got a game in that wasn't Tunguska. It was with my OSS, and it was pretty fun. It was a game of Frontline against vanilla JSA. And yeah, I ended up thinking I was a turn behind of where we were, so I could have gotten a bunch of classifieds and forgot that we were at the bottom of turn 3 almost, instead of the bottom of turn 2, and so that didn't really work out. But yeah, it was neat. I got to try out Maximus, and his immunity armor probably saved him half a dozen or more saving rolls that he didn't have to make throughout that game, so that was neat. He got to go toe-to-toe with a APHMG Oyoroi and not be overly worried. He was trying to wail on a Shikami, except he wasn't winning any of the face-to-face rolls, but he also was just not getting scratched by it, because he's only taking one save and it's not halved. So that was pretty interesting. And yeah, so that's kind of how my last week or so has been in Infinity Land. But more to the point, Super Jump and Climbing Plus, the two main things that give you speed in Infinity in terms of extra movement skills, other than just the raw movement stat itself. And they've both changed quite a bit this edition. Um, Ian, do you want to kind of go? Let's start with climbing. If you kind of want to go over just kind of the basics of climb and how that works now, since that has changed since last edition.
Yeah, so climb change the two big changes to climb are that regardless of your movement stat, climb is now 6 inches, and that is measured from the bottom of your base to the bottom of your base when you end. And that climbing plus is changed to the climb skill to a basic order instead of it being a short movement skill, which means it has to the climbing plus has to follow all of the normal rules of climb, with the exception that it is a short order instead of a long order. And that does mean that you have to start in base contact with the vertical element of the scenery you are climbing when you declare climbing plus.
Yeah, a big change from last edition where it basically just let you wall walk for free. But yeah, so it is pretty interesting. It does make a lot more buildings more traversable, depending on the model, I suppose, since previously you could measure from the top of your silhouette if you wanted to, and you only used your movement value. Now it's a flat 6 inches for everybody, like Ian was saying, and you measure from the bottom. So, depending on the troop, that may not actually be a gain, but it should at least be about the same. I think the only ones that actually are much better, I suppose, are silhouette 1 units. If you're climbing up a wall with a puppet bot or something.
Yeah, 2 would be roughly on par, but honestly, if you're maybe 5, definitely 6 and 7, you actually might be losing a little bit of distance.
Compared to where you were before, for sure, yeah. Though you have to stop once you reach the top. So there is that to kind of consider where you can't keep moving after you have climbed up. And you have to, when you declare climb, you have to be touching whatever it is you're climbing up or down. Which climb, at least in those regards, climb has stayed the same. Like that's how it worked before. But climbing plus now has to abide by all of that, which is pretty significant. The main benefit of climbing plus is that, like Ian said, you get to declare it as a basic skill instead of a long skill. But you can that means you can also do other skills except move. It does call out you can't still walk up walls with your second skill, which makes me a little sad. But
Climb,
it does
climb.
let you. You could, yeah, exactly. You could climb to get up a 12-inch tall structure, or just something that's more than 6 inches. So, which there's definitely terrain like that out there. Even just the Corvus Belli cardboard terrain. I think the expansion packs,
The
the
towers, too.
towers, I think those are around 8 inches or so. So there are uses for that, and that does help. But mostly it's that you aren't, if you don't finish climbing to the top of something, you're not dead in the water. Whereas with climb, you basically can't declare other skills. But with climbing plus, you can still shoot um,
Dodge.
or dodge and the like. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, climbing plus is definitely better to have rather than not have, but it's not nearly as good as it was previously. So as far as utilizing climbing plus, what do you feel like are some good situations where you feel like climbing plus is of particular value, or where you might look to have climbing plus on something? Like if I have this role, I'd love to have climbing plus on this type of unit.
I think generally things that are fast, it's going to be useful on. Not because you're going to climb any faster, but because you are more likely to be able to move into base with that wall
Hmm.
and then be able to declare climb with your second skill, or move into base with a wall and declare climb with your next order's first skill to get up to the top. I think there's a lot of potential with like mimetism gunfighters, because when you
Hmm.
climb, you're not going to get cover when you crest the wall, but being able to climb up and still put some negs on your opponent potentially and get an angle on something to catch it out of cover potentially, I think that's where climbing plus is going to have a lot of utility. If your climbing plus model is a specialist and there happens to be an objective on top of a building,
Hmm.
that could also be very
Absolutely.
useful, especially if it's something like close enough where you can climb the wall and where you end your movement
And
also gets
touching
you
it. Yeah.
into base with the objective, and then you can spend your next your other half to interact with it. So I don't
Absolutely.
think it's like it definitely took a big hit. I think it's much more situational. I think you have to kind of plan out carefully how you're going to use it, as opposed to just free reign, run around and do whatever you want. But
Yeah.
I do think it definitely does still have some use in the game.
Yeah, it definitely needs a little bit more finesse to use properly. But yeah, I think that it's really cool on defensive units, and particularly defensive units that transition well to then attacking. So, for instance, a common one that people run into are the total reaction remotes in the faction, because a fair number of those have climbing plus, not all of them, but a fair few of them have climbing plus, and so you can have them starting next to, they're usually going to be on a building covering a corridor, or if you're brave, several, and then you can just climb down to the bottom and start running off again, and then move to a new position without really losing anything that you wouldn't have been able to do prior to that. Uh, and other pieces that transition well, also, like things that are, say, units that are good at hybrid weaponry options, like rocket launchers or sniper rifles or things like that, can really benefit from that same type of play. But yeah, so a lot of it is just being careful to end up touching where you're about to climb up or down from. Like if you can still manage that without wasting a ton of movement, then it's going to feel pretty decent still. I think that, if you're easily caught out and have trouble eyeballing some of those distances, then it might be rough where, you run forward 4 inches and you're still an inch and a half away from the wall, and then you have to go up and then spend a new order to climb down and all that. Then it doesn't feel very good. So, one other thing to keep in mind when you are using climb via climbing plus or the standard climb, they both work the same way. It's just either long or basic skill, is that you have to be on a vertical surface. Now, I don't think that you need to necessarily read this in the strictest sense of it only works on surfaces that are exactly 90 degrees from the surface of your table, but it does mean that you can't walk on the underside of things. So you can't uh, anymore climb along the bottom of a bridge, or uh, under outcroppings or balconies or things like that, which is something you could do before. But I think that that is pretty clearly nixed at the moment for climb. So that's something to bear in mind. That does change. It's not something I saw a lot, but it is something you used to see sometimes, and so just important to keep in mind that that won't be possible. But with that said, what are some units that you've liked so far in N5 with Climbing Plus? Have you? Well, I guess first, have you gotten a chance to play with any
I have
that you've used currently?
not, well, because
Because there's some in Shinden Butai, right? Like there's the Nokozaru, at least. I don't know if there's a lot else. Maybe some of
yeah,
the ninjas.
there's really not a whole lot. Um, and like I've played with some of them, but I haven't used climbing plus with them. No,
Fair.
actually, that is not true.
Oh, the Megazoid, right?
The Mechazoid, the tag has climbing
Yeah.
plus, and I did use that. That
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
actually useful because it allowed me to get up on top of a building and square off with something I didn't have line of fire to outside of that. So yeah, that was pretty useful. But yeah, it's on the Nokizaru, the ninjas, the basic ninjas, the Jizamurai, and the Monstrucker,
Oh,
which
sure.
I
Yeah.
haven't I used a Monstrucker, but I haven't used Climbing Plus with the Monstrucker in this edition.
Fair.
But yeah, no, the Mechazoid I definitely did. That was a fairly entertaining use for it. So I do like that.
Yeah. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, because it was a thing where I got to the top of the building, we gun fought, and then I went to move again and dodged and was able to dodge that thing's ridiculous like plus 3 inches of dodge, so it dodges 5 inches, and it was just like, and it's over here now. Like it dodges almost as fast as it moves.
Yeah, which is just crazy. It's a massive dodge distance. And then I know at least in our game you were running a tagcom unit. Were you doing that in this game also?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Dodging
dodging
on
on
14s.
what, 14s? Yeah,
Yep.
that's solid. That feels pretty all right. On an unrelated note, I find it funny that the multi Spitfire is several points more than the APHMG.
Mhm.
It's kind of weird. That's valuing shock in a burst 1 DA a fair bit to be 3 points more than an APHMG. I don't know if I would expect that. I feel like that's not what my normal convention would think.
Gonna go against the normal convention as well, but I think the range band plays into it because as a more mobile unit, it's gonna be easier for it to play in that 8 to 24 range as opposed to the 16 to 32 range. And because it's CC oriented, it wants to get up close. So I don't know if this is factored into the points costing, but I like that because I'm going to be up there anyway.
But that's almost like a disincentive, right? So it's like, oh, well, if you want to be using it this way, then you're going to pay a premium to do so.
Yeah.
Which seems kind of odd. Like you would think that it would be, if you want to focus a unit into a certain playstyle, that you would encourage it mechanically.
Yeah.
Instead of discourage it.
Maybe, I don't know. I think multi just gets valued higher than a set ammo type, like regardless.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, but I would think
versatility is a thing.
True, but HMGs are more expensive than Spitfires, and so I would think that they'd be like very like the same cost, maybe.
No, because it's the only one. I'm paying a premium for having the only one in the game.
That's it.
You can't have it.
Oh my goodness! It's so strange that
it's not yours. It's mine. Only mine. You can't have it.
I know. I don't understand though. Maybe fingers crossed for a new Aleph sectoral this this summer/fall.
No, it's proprietary JSA tech.
But yeah, like I don't understand why multi-Red Furies exist. Why isn't it a multi-Spitfire?
Because
it already has an ammo type.
Proprietary JSA tech, and you all get to deal with the multi-Red Fury, and JSA can keep the only multi-Spitfire.
There you go. Well, fair enough, I guess. In a I don't get a choice sort of way.
That's right. You don't.
Yeah, so for me, I think that like Zayn and reaction zones, the TR bots, I think that it's really cool there. I like that a fair bit because they're usually going to be in a position where they can kind of get away with that and can, kind of already be in place to start their climb immediately. And they're usually short enough that on a fair number of buildings, they can climb up and then they can, move some to not quite be in sight, but then move across to the other side of a building and then gain sight when they have cover that order. So I think that that's a pretty cool use for them. I think that, like you said, specialists are really good. Like I need to put Mary Problems on the table again, and I think that it'll still be useful on her, even though it's not quite what it once was. But I think that Mary Problems being able, that was one of the things I really enjoyed with her last edition as well, is being able to, like you said, snag objectives that are on buildings, because that's a fairly common thing that happens. Because my experience is generally that we set up a table and then place the objectives. Sometimes terrain will get nudged if something is in kind of an awkward spot, like, oh, well, it's only 2/3 on this thing. Let's nudge it so that it's, fully set or fully on the ground, one or the other, and things like that. But generally speaking, we see the table placement and then objectives afterwards. And I think it's interesting to have objectives on buildings sometimes, because that can influence deployment, that can incentivize skills just like this. And it's a pretty potent ability, even with some of the drawbacks that it's received. But yeah, I think that specialists and gunfighters alike can enjoy that. Need to also run around with the Lunicods. Did you see that the Lunicods are 8-2 move now with forward deployment?
That's kind of ridiculous.
It's pretty neat, and they got emitters.
Yeah,
so they need to do some wall running. But yeah. But on to our other skill of the episode, something that has significantly increased in efficacy, is super jump. And you want to talk briefly about how the base jump skill works?
So, like climb and super jump has also increased to a flat 6 inches, regardless of your movement value. And so, most things got a little better. Some things got stayed the same or got a little worse. And there are some variations on this, as well as with climb. Jump also has like an 8-inch version that certain models will have. So it's one where basically it's a long order. You have to be able to draw a parabolic arc from bottom of the base of where you started to bottom of the base of where you're ending. And you don't get cover through the movement, and kind of very similar to what it was before as far as that. But
it can be
bottom
as
to
well.
bottom. Yeah. Because it's a minute parabolic arc.
Yeah, there we go. That's
it's very shallow.
Mathematicians ignore us.
Yeah. So yeah, you can use it to move basically straight as well, but it does have to be in a straight line. Bam, point A to point B, and jump is a little more useful just in terms of having that little bit longer distance on a lot of it, especially for I see a certain models being able to get off of buildings easier, where before they would have had to spend like 2 orders climbing down. They can now just jump down. I guess same does go in reverse, but I see down being a little more useful than up with just basic jump. So,
right.
But yeah, pretty cool. And then super jump it turns that jump skill into a short skill. So
basic skill.
Yeah, nice basic skill. So you can
do
it and then do other things. Maybe even jump twice.
That's true.
But specifically in super jump, you still add, is it a flat 4 inches on the second part of it if you do a long order super jump?
Yeah, if you long order jump with the super jump skill, it's 6 and then an additional 4. So you
10.
Can do a 10-inch jump. If you need to cross a large distance or you need to jump to something particularly tall, now you can cover more ground if you're doing both basic skill jumps, but that requires you to have a landing spot somewhere in the middle. But if you're just trying to go up to the top of a building or something that's taller than 6 inches, then you might have to do a long skill jump in order to make that work.
Yes. And I said this has to be in a straight line. There is a sub-skill called jet propulsion that allows you to not have to move in a straight line, or you can move kind of around corners a bit. But we'll get into some details and rule stuff a little bit later when we get towards that, where it's maybe not that simple.
Yeah, it's a little strange, a little unclear in some ways. But yeah, so the one of the big differences with super jump is that it has a lot more freedom of movement compared to climbing plus now. And so because it replaces your movement, that means that you're getting effectively a 6-6 move, assuming each move is in a direct parabola or a straight line in some direction, which makes some things much faster than when they were. And I generally don't see a problem with that on the base super jump. I think that that is pretty interesting, and it kind of puts it largely not against horizontal movement, like just moving across the table, but at least for vertical movement, it puts you kind of back to where you were because you're not measuring from the top of your silhouette, you're measuring from the bottom, which makes certain things not it made certain things slower, but then just a flat 6 inches. But there are some modifiers. We've talked briefly about jet propulsion, and we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. But there also is, just like how jump has an 8-inch modifier, where you can jump 8 inches instead of the flat 6 inches, super jump can do that as well, which means then the model becomes a pseudo 8-8 move unit, again, as long as you move in parabolas or straight lines, which is really fast. Now, all of the vehicles can currently do this, but the part that I am still wary of are units that are size 2. Like size 2 units that have that much freedom of movement is a lot. So, is it going to be a game-breaking issue? I don't think so. But it is very powerful. Movement is very important in most miniature games, and Infinity is no exception. And so, small units that can kind of evade AROs just because they're not very visible compared to, say, the size 7 vehicles is a lot. So, those are things like Rodox or Coatage and things along those lines. But jet propulsion, Ian, you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, super jump jet propulsion is a subset of the skill that some models have, and it allows you to change your direction mid jump so that you can, kind of jump around a corner and gain a line of fire, things like that. But where it's unclear is that it says, and then turn back before landing. And it is implied that you can, jump up to basically half of your distance out or whatever, and then change direction to come back. Both of the examples in the book have the super jump jet propulsion model returning to its original position where it initiated the super jump. But the rule itself is not completely specify that. It does say turn back, but it's a little unclear. Now, the intent may be that yes, you return to your initial starting spot. This is like a jetpack that you kind of use to peek corners and come back, and the examples would support that. But the text of the rule does not entirely restrict it to that. So it's a little up in the air until CB kind of addresses that.
How dare you? This is not the place for puns, Ian.
It's always the place for puns. Bad ones at that.
But yeah, so it is pretty interesting because initially it kind of seemed like jet propulsion might be a you can freely move through the air skill, which, as per the name of the skill, it kind of makes sense. And I'm not sure. I mean, I've played with several models with jet propulsion, and it seems somewhat helpful. But mostly because if you look at the examples in the book, they tend to be pretty simplified, of course. And it's so the example given with the Banshee is not particularly advantageous. They could just sidestep and see it instead of specifically needing to jump. But it is kind of interesting because it can allow you to do things like go up 4 inches and see something on a rooftop that you can't see otherwise, and then land back down where you were, or, off to the side somewhat if you started there. So there's some use, but jet propulsion itself feels like it has very limited use cases. So I'm curious to see if that is exactly how it's intended, is to just move then rubber band back, or if there's a little bit more freedom in what you can do there. Now, I don't think that that's going to be a huge deal because I think that the only models that can both get 8-inch jumps and have jet propulsion are going to be the vehicles. So I would be okay with jet propulsion being a little bit more freeform in that regard. So we'll see if that ends up actually changing. But yeah, I definitely would not want that on size 2 models. I feel like that is altogether too much freedom, and it's way too easy to slice the pie with something like that. Whereas you have to pay much more attention with a size 7 model.
Yeah. I said there are plenty of size 2 models that have super jump jet propulsion. They just don't get the extra movement.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that a lot of, I think, almost every combat jump unit and
Mm-hmm.
even a handful of parachutists, I think, picked up super jump jet propulsion, which is really cool for them. Like it's an interesting movement ability, and I think that that's kind of cool to have those what tend to be lighter units that can go around and kind of be those sort of backfield sweepers. I mean, there are certainly some units that are not fragile that are doing this, like Dikosh or Duroc or
The
things along
Seraph.
those lines. The Seraph. Well, the Seraph is not coming in your deployment zone.
No, but he is a super jump 8 inches with super jump jet propulsion.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, but is also vehicle sized.
Yes.
So yeah, it is. Yeah, I haven't had the pleasure / misfortune of playing with or against a Seraph yet. So we'll see how that goes. I know someone signed up with military orders in the league, and I know they were excited to run the Seraphs.
Good. It's an underrated tag in most prior editions.
It definitely
I love it. I think
was
it's
not
been
awesome.
fantastic. I when I ran military orders, I loved running it. I actually did not
Mhm.
like the teak belaying for military orders, so I wouldn't run it. Um,
I don't like that it was in military orders because it seemed
yeah,
weird to have like an outsider tag show up their in faction tag. It's
yeah,
like why have another one when we could just make the existing one more interesting?
yeah. And
And
I think the Seraph was good the whole
yeah,
time. I think people didn't really know how to use it.
suppose there could be some of that.
Yeah, but now
But
it's
yeah,
real good.
yeah, it is pretty wild. Again, haven't played with or against it yet, so just speculation. But yeah, that's a lot of movement on something that is quite durable. Because the Seraph is arm 7 or 6?
Arm 7,
7.
BTS
Yeah,
6, 3
yeah,
structure, and
sure.
both its Oxbot and its ancillary are packing super jump 8 inches and jet propulsion.
That's really cool for the ancillary, actually. I mean, it's important for the synchronized bot too, but I was not expecting the ancillary to have it.
Yeah.
And that's actually interesting. So that allows you to still get it to move while you're declaring these jumps with the Seraph. And that's pretty
Hmm.
notable. Like being able to get your specialist around the board faster than the other ones, I think.
It,
And yeah, that's pretty interesting.
it also means potential burst 3 Seraph and CC.
That is a thing you could do. I feel like I'd rather have the Crabot running after objectives, but that is a way to do it.
But
If
hey,
you
if
want
I
to
need to
really
hit
dogpile on
something
something.
with 3 explosive hits and just make sure it's really down.
Right? Get out. That's actually pretty funny for things like mind wipe or looting and sabotaging where you're trying to
Yeah.
destroy objectives.
Hmm.
That's a lot of smashing.
Yeah, and it's a PS4, but it doesn't have any AP on it. So
Sure, yeah.
yeah,
But they don't tend to have like ludicrously high armor. I think the AC2 from looting and sabotaging is armor 6.
yeah,
So tends to pass, and you're hitting probably all 3 times.
yeah. Well, definitely because it's CC23 with martial arts 1. So
Yeah, but
2030.
it has the fixed 8 to oppose the test with. So like
Okay.
you can lose that. And
Yeah.
that between your crit threshold and that is a 4 to 8 does nothing.
Yeah. That's fair.
Which is not a massive range, but a notable one. So yeah, super jump is real fast, and it's one of those things where I think that we're really early in the meta still, and things are still developing, and proactive strategies are always going to initially be more effective than reactive strategies, because for a reactive strategy to work, you need to experience said proactive strategy. And so I think that's where a lot of these uh, anxieties are coming from for a number of players. Where I've certainly seen players say that, oh, well, alpha striking is even more of a problem than before, which I think that it might be in some ways and less so in others. And super jump is definitely a part of that equation, right? Because this gives you a lot of mobility. And I think that you can't lean on null deployments or when you deploy where you show as few models as possible or oftentimes no models. I suppose would be a true null deployment is where you post up no arrows. I don't think that is a very feasible way to play anymore.
No.
But I think that's a good thing in some ways. I think that it encourages interaction and also encourages a little bit of variety in list building where you're not trying to, okay, either I'm going to go first with my really hard hitting, fast moving army, or I'm going to go second. I'm going to turtle up entirely and let them waste a bunch of orders to come my direction. And then I'll hit them really hard with my fast, hard hitting forces. So now things are too fast that you can't reliably keep your deployment zone safe without some arrows. And I think that's an important part of the game. I think that's part of why we play Infinity other than some other miniatures games is explicitly for that interaction and being able to participate in each other's turns. So that's still good. But yeah, Ian, do you have any thoughts or concerns on alpha striking? And do you feel like that is more prevalent or less prevalent or maybe the same?
I'm going to say it's probably roughly the same, but maybe incrementally less effective to Alpha Strike. And the reason
Okay.
for that is that when I'm looking at the way that the dice interact with each other now and with bonuses and all that, and fire teams getting a max of +1 to their ballistic skill.
Sure.
So like, and then with the way the special die works. So what I'm seeing is that the active fire team has about 2 less ballistic skill, or it's a solo fighter, so it has 3 less ballistic skill. And you're getting the special die, so you're getting as many chances to hit, but 1 less of those can cause damage.
Sure. And I think
Okay.
that for most weapons, that's not a significant difference.
Yeah, but I'm just talking, on some of the mathematics standpoint that
Sure.
your target number is slightly lower, and your chances of doing, your chances to hit remain the same within that target number,
Sure.
but your total damage output went down a little bit. Okay, and now you flip
Potentially,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, now you flip it to the the reactive side, and again, yes, you did lose some potential ballistic skill. You're at +1 or flat because fire team, no fire team bonus. That just is what it is. But your opportunity with the special die to contest the roll in a face-to-face remain the same. Even if your damage output to put your opponent down and stop the alpha strike from that model also went down because you can't, put out as much damage, just like the active turn. Your chance to contest, your opportunities to contest stayed the same. So I do feel that that's a ever so slight alien favor of reactive. Like, yes, active is still stronger. It always will be. But I feel like in the balance of active to reactive, that reactive bumped slightly only because your reactive piece has a slightly better chance to remain standing while at the same time having the same amount of chance to contest the roll.
Yeah, my thoughts on that are mostly that if you are attacking with a gunfighter and we're assuming that they are a base 3 or 4 burst weapon, which I think is kind of the typical,
Yeah.
that adding that 4th or 5th die, not all of what you're rolling is going to connect anyway. Like, it's not very likely that you were hitting with all 4 to 5 dice in the last edition, and so dropping one of those this edition probably doesn't actually affect the overall damage very much. It affects the maximum potential damage, but I think the typical damage is probably very similar. But with
it's
AROs,
always
when
a dice game with random results, so
I mean, yes, but it's not just, dice can be wherever. It's that how likely are you to roll 4 or 5 dice and all of them be successful and all of them beat the opposing rolls? Almost like that's much more rare. And so if you're dropping one of those, it was probably because it was a failure or it was beaten anyway. So I don't think it limits how much damage active turn is doing, but I think it affects the reactive turn more. Because you might get one through, but that's now that's as good as you can possibly get, is getting one through.
And that's fair. But I feel like you have multiple extra opportunities to post up AROs in this edition.
Because of duos or what have you.
Yeah, between duos giving the special dice and the increased access to total reaction and neurocynetics across all factions, because everybody's got a basically everybody. Ariadna still got
a non-SWC,
but there's a non-SW. There's a Thunderbolt total reaction that costs less points and is no SWC. So you have access
easier to fit them in,
cheaper in that. I'd have to actually look at neurocynetics, but it feels like there's a little bit more of that just from skimming through profiles. So you have that, and then the addition of the deployable turrets. Now, granted, it's also rare to have a deployable turret with Mine Layer, but
just the one right now, just the Firefly.
But
certainly,
the fact that deployable turrets exist, and I'm not going to get into all of the stuff with stacking up ridiculous amounts of turrets and all that, because like whatever.
That's a different episode.
Yeah, but the fact that deployable turrets exist, and with a little bit of planning, you can attempt to set up some of those in some key spots to, just soak up orders. Honestly, that's all that they're even really looking for. It's not to do damage; it's to soak up orders.
Right. I think arrows in general lean more that direction, even more than before. Like, that's in my mind. Even in previous iterations of Infinity, the idea was that arrows are to stall, not necessarily to kill. Like, to kill that's gravy. That's a nice bonus. But really all you're hoping is that they stall. And I think turrets are really good at that.
Yeah, now because it's still crap because it's usually a BS-10 turret with a rifle of some type. So it's still crappy range bands and low damage.
You don't play a cool faction.
I said generally. Screw you, Pano. But generally you have a rifle or combi rifle with those range bands with
Hmm.
BS10. Its advantage is that it's rolling 3 dice and it's not
Yeah.
costing you an order when they take it out. But
Right.
it's harder for them to ignore it if it's going to get to shoot because it is 3 dice. And even at low odds, crits happen, successes happen. Those three
Yeah.
dice does give an
Moving out of
increased
cover.
odds of that happening. So especially if there's more than one such ARO posted up, and even if it's a turret and just something firing one shot, it's still a thing where then the opponent has to make choices of dodging or splitting burst or not contesting one aspect of this.
For
So
sure.
I think it yes, it wastes orders, and that is the intention, and that is what it's going to be very good at. But that increased burst just give it that little bit of edge of maybe they're unlucky and you actually hurt them with it.
Right. Right. But yeah. Circling back around to kind of our main point, um, I want to talk about Super Jump a little bit more in terms of some of your. I don't know how much experience you've gotten with Super Jump in this edition, with playing with or against it. I know I've played a little bit against you
Mm-hmm.
with Super Jump so far, but how have you felt about it on the table?
Like, I haven't felt really like it's that much of a difference from what it was in N4, only in terms
Okay.
of like super jump is super jump. It basically works the same. You're just measuring from the bottom of the base. The slight increase in range to 6 inches, I think, is neat, but not game breaking. The
Mm-hmm.
potential for moving, 12 or 16 inches, depending on which level of super jump you have, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think can be feels bad for your opponent,
Sure.
but I'm also going to throw out there that on most tables that I've seen, if your opponent can freely move that far in what is essentially one or two straight lines because you have a landing point in the middle without gathering, procking AROs, you've probably deployed poorly.
Or something has already knocked out those arrow pieces.
And that is fair, but that's also meant that they had to spend orders to knock out those ARO pieces to move something else up that then does not have
Sure.
as many orders to go ham on your back line. I'm
Yeah.
not saying
So
it
I
don't
think.
won't happen, but I'm saying that a lot of the potential danger of this is mitigatable through good
Mhm.
deployment, good play, and good force selection.
Sure. I think that you can definitely mitigate it, but I know the concern uh, that even I still have somewhat. I think that I'm less worried playing several games with and against vehicles. It's only been a couple, but I've played 3 games with a GoPod and a game against a Feiquang, the Jijing one, the ISS one. And I think that they are good. I would even say pretty good, but didn't feel like utterly backbreaking. Again, with the exception of your and I's game, because I think that a lot of that was just variance. It wasn't just that it was fast or was particularly oppressive. I think that part of it was what really was dice.
Yeah, you
And
actually
I
crit
think
me
that
like 6 times in a row.
6 times in a row. It was not 6 times in a row, Ian.
Okay, it was five
It
times
was
in a
spread
row.
out.
Felt like six.
No. But yeah, so like the GoPod just went ham that game, and things just like everything was coming up GoPod. But in other games, like I didn't even want to activate it. Like I might have talked about it on the show before, but like the one of the other games I played against a Kiosat and 2 Yaogats. Like, well, the GoPod has nothing to do in that game because these are spread out all over the board, and there are a bunch of Warhorse MSV units. So it's like, okay, well, I guess I could jump out in the open and give you +3 ballistic skill. That sounds cool.
I mean, I learned my lesson. Tanuki
Mm-hmm.
HMG. That's the lesson.
Tanuki HMG. That does seem like a good call. That'll help, especially in active.
Yeah. Like take that,
But yeah,
Go Pod.
that GoPod. But yeah, I'm interested to mess around with them a little bit more. I think that they're really cool. I want to try the Red Eye in Pano. I think that'll be really interesting because that one, part of it is that the Red Eye is so much tougher. Like it's triple the armor of the GoPod, but doesn't have a peripheral buddy and has shorter range weaponry. But again, I don't think that's a huge deal on a 8-inch jumping jet propulsion model. Not that jet propulsion makes it any faster, apparently, but you know, it makes it sound real cool while it's jumping around. That's what jet propulsion's
See,
for.
the one that I want is to play with at some point is the Zaybak.
Oh, the albedo one from Hakazlam.
Yeah, because I'm like, this thing is awesome. It has albedo -6, and then it has an escape system. So after it takes 2 points off of its structure, the operator, because it's like an iguana, the
Mm-hmm.
operator drops out with the Spitfire and just continues to kill things.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was like, it's 37 points. It's stupid.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's pretty solid points to structure ratio. Now, again, you kind of have to, and it is ARM 5, which is significant.
Yeah,
I think
BTS
that's
6.
pretty
Like it's
decent.
not bad. But
But
it does
yeah,
not have mimetism, so it just has the
right.
albedo.
Yeah, which I think that there's more of that to consider in terms of contextual, what is going to be relevant for your games and your meta. Like if you find a lot of MSV defensive pieces, then the Zapac's going to be great and is going to cause a lot of problems for those units.
Also,
But if
the
they
operator
don't,
keeps the albedo.
that's nice. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good grab. Does it keep the smoke launcher?
No, but it has
Okay,
a boarding pistol.
that's kind of neat.
So yeah, it drops out, and it's just like I still have the albedo, and then I can template you too.
There you go. Yeah, the fact that it's an albedo unit with a smoke launcher is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that super jump is very, very good. I think that it is quite powerful. I think that 8-inch super jump, in my opinion, should be relegated to the big models. Like that should just be things like the vehicles. And I think that's what should make them unique beyond just the aerial rule, of course, is that they're really fast. Like that's their thing. They move around and are the only quasi 8-8 units in the game. When infantry can do it, that makes me a little wary. So I do want to play more with and against those sorts of units, but I feel like it is just a little more maneuverability than I feel like a size 2 model should have. Again, gut feelings, speculation, sure. But that's kind of my current take on that. But yeah, so have you? I know we've talked about climbing plus models and not really having much use there or much use of them there. But what about super jump? Have you been doing any super jumping, or have you
Yes.
had bad experiences with super jump besides that
No,
GoPod?
no, no. I have awesome experiences with Super Jump.
Good, good, good.
Um, so one of my games I was playing against Steel Phalanx, or
Mhm.
no, it was definitely Steel Phalanx. There was way too many characters to not be Steel Phalanx.
Right, yeah,
Anyway,
familiar
um,
with. Mm,
yeah, I had way too many of them. Anyway, Scylla and Charybdis were coming up a flank, and they stopped right near one of the objectives. And unfortunately, it was a thing where I had a Kuriyami ninja over there hidden deployed near the objective, and it was unfortunate because the Charybdis bot was like right at the corner and Scylla behind him, so I would have to like go around him to get into like CC or shoot or whatever and just eat the flamethrower, and it would have been pretty horrible. Uh,
right, yeah.
and it was like, oh no, it's not really gonna work. And then I perused the profile and realized that this thing has super jump. And with
Yeah.
the 6 inches of super jump, I was able to jump over the building's corner,
Yeah.
completely out of line of fire of the crib just brought directly into Scylla and just annihilate her in CC.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah. She
awesome.
is. Yeah, she is not terribly hardy in CC. That's for sure. Like,
But
I
it was
mean, I guess she's
awesome.
got a CC of like 20, which is kind of surprising for just some random hacker. But also, she has no skills and has like
Yeah, and
paper
with
armor.
uh martial arts 2 and surprise attack hitting at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was over real quick with that
Hmm.
nice DA close combat weapon. No. But yeah,
Sounds about
that
right.
was my primary super jump situation, and it was epic.
Yeah, that is super cool. Yeah, I had a pretty good experience. Obviously, the GoPod did really well that game, but also in a different game, Raoul Spector did surprisingly well. He was in another one of my Tunguska lists, obviously. I guess now he's Tunguska exclusive, which is kind of cool. He's not in vanilla anymore. But yeah, so I normally like to take the Drop Troop Spectre and just go with the combat jump version. But with the change to shotguns, and the change to super jump, the FTO version that's regular and starts in the DZ seems a lot more appealing. I actually had a really good experience with Raul because he was in my deployment zone. I was getting my GoPod was slightly pinned by the new sapper sniper in Jishing, the Silver Snake. And in one order, I was able to move Spectre to the objective in the center line, then grab it and move to cover. Then the third order, move out to in cover and then shoot the Silver Snake and put him down inside his zero range band, and then get back in another order, or I guess two orders. So it was like fighting stuff in the in the midfield and pulling away arrows, and that were in the enemy's deployment zone, and then jumping all the way back to my deployment zone. And it was surprising because he definitely was not that fast before. Like being a 4.4 model. I mean, now he's 6'2", but being even then when he was 4.4, yeah, kind of crazy. It was really cool. He's pretty nasty right now.
I'm just looking up the silver snakes because I hadn't looked at them yet, and holy crap, those are cool.
But they are really interesting. Yeah, it was the Sapper K1 sniper, I think.
Yeah, that's the one I was like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
That I love sapper profiles. Just throwing it out there.
Sapper's neat.
But yeah, a sapper K1 sniper is great. Albedo -6 on every model in the unit. Okay, that
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just hadn't got a chance to get around to looking at these guys yet. Oh, those are nice.
And the emitter's pretty interesting on that Sapper profile also. It didn't come up in that game, but
Yeah.
it's just kind of a scary thing to have.
Well, and the fact that every one of these models has an emitter or an EM carbine,
Mm-hmm.
AP mines
Yeah.
on a lot of them.
Yeah, I've noticed EM has become a fair bit more proliferated, which I'm interested to see how that
Yeah.
impacts the meta. Because tags are obviously really good right now because they're much less scared of AROs than they were.
Mm-hmm.
So but if more of those are EM arrows, well, then maybe they are pretty scared still.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And just while we're on new units for a second, the Long Wing is epically awesome. Like,
Yeah, it seems pretty cool.
Biovisor, especially now that it does things, it's just like, haha, I see you, Speculo, have fun.
Right.
And I just love that, like, everything on these is like, yeah, we have a gun, and then we have like 3 adhesive or para weapons on each one.
Yep.
I'm like, yep, let's do it.
And it's one of the few models in the game that penalizes the save on those
Mm-hmm.
because now it's saving roll minus X on BS attacks. So that means you're
Yes,
rolling at a Fizz -7, effectively.
that is
Kind of
true.
neat.
I like it.
On
I
both
mean,
the rifles and the riot stoppers, the
yep,
adhesive launcher rifles and the riot stoppers. Yeah, it's a really interesting tag. I like the design overall quite a bit.
yeah, and the concept art that was in the lore book is pretty cool too.
Yeah, yeah, it looks solid.
So, yay.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that we're at a point where we can just about transition to final thoughts. But I do want to take a moment and say thank you to all of our supporters of the show. Um, both anyone who listens to the show regularly. I really appreciate it. That means a lot to us. I also see reviews or people recommending us on the IGC Facebook group and things like that. I really appreciate those things, and that means a lot to us that you enjoy our content and that you want to share it with other people. So thank you for that. And for our patrons, we want to say a big thank you to you as well for being able to and willing to financially support the show. That helps us take care of expenses that would otherwise be entirely out of pocket. And all of your contributions stay in the show. They don't go to our pockets in any way. We don't pay ourselves or anything like that. So, yeah, and if you're interested in joining those ranks, you can do so at patreon.com/metachemistry. And we like to offer some incentives to kind of show our gratitude for you being willing to do that. So those take the form of things like final voting in polls when those come around, early access to episodes. There are some channels in the Discord that are Patreon exclusive or patron exclusive, rather. And so those are some of the benefits that you can potentially get for that. And as far as the Discord itself goes, that is, other than a handful of channels, is free and open to everyone. And we'd love to have you there. It's a great place to talk Infinity. We also have places for other games and activities as well. So there's some kind of off-topic stuff if you are interested in like finding other people with similar interests. And yeah, otherwise, there's people talking about lists. There's people talking about new projects they're working on hobby wise, cool 3D printed tables, awesome paint jobs, all that good stuff. And like I said at the top, you're entered into a $40 coupon code to Mo Games just by being a part of that. So feel free to join us. And as always, that's going to be in the show notes, so you can find us there. But with that said, Ian, final thoughts on our mobility skills, our skills formerly known as meta agility, for those old enough in the game.
Um, so change is scary. Just throw that out there.
Sure.
But I don't think this is necessarily broken one way or the other. You're going to hear me say this a lot, but this is a new game. And we're generally approaching it with a lot of background knowledge from prior editions, especially on 4, because we're just coming out of it. And obviously, like, you start something, a new edition, you kind of start off with what you did before and see if it works. And there's a lot of differences with this edition, and this is one of them. So sometimes, we got to kind of put aside what we've done before and search out new ways of doing it. Not everything is going to work how it did before. Your lists are going to change. They're going to adapt to new uses of skills, new combinations, new forms that the individual metas are going to shake out to be. I think it's also we're just about a month in to N5, and it's still too early to really have a defined, this is how everything is going to work and how the meta shakes out. Aside from the fact that Infinity is hard to just pin down that like this is the meta and this is what's good, because
Right.
it is
Yeah,
such
of
a
course.
complex game where player choice matters so much. But it's going to take a little while for things to kind of shake out into some form of list stability. So all I can say is like experiment with stuff, try new things, new combinations, see kind of what works, because what you did before may or may not work. And I definitely been running into that with some of my games and trying to adapt a lot of my thinking. Fire teams is one, just moving towards,
Mhm.
I can find myself building lists and still like building to put like cores in it. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't need a core. Let me
Right.
put
It
three
doesn't have
duos instead, and it does, you know, the same thing, but spread out across more of the board. So it is a new game, and we all need to kind of keep that in mind and approach things inquisitively and differently and see what kind of works now. I think it's going to be interesting.
for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree that Infinity is a very subjective game, and there are just so many factors that play into it that it's hard to really make a lot of definitive statements in the game. But yeah, as far as Super Jump and Climbing Plus goes, yes, I think Climbing Plus is objectively worse than it was. But I think it's still a useful skill and is still going to have some pretty decent value. I know some people will look at profiles that are Climbing Plus and think, oh, well, this just sucks now. I've seen that come up a couple times. But I don't think that's really the case. I think that they are a little bit more tricky to use, but not by leaps and bounds. Super Jump I want to keep an eye on. Super Jump is very powerful. It is objectively better than it was last edition. And I think that time will tell if it becomes a major issue, but I do think that it is a strong skill. I think it's very useful, and it does give you a ton of mobility, which is very powerful, of course. So, something to keep an eye on. And I'm interested to hear your experiences with both of these skills. How much have you been getting to use them, and what have they been like in your games? And are you not taking Climbing Plus models that you used to because you just don't care if you have it or not, or are you still having fun with those? And likewise, what are your fun super jump stories? Love to hear those. But on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin.
And Ian, and that's the meta.